The first thing that hit him wasn't her voice, or the way she stood, or even the scent of the lilies she held. It was her face, so strikingly familiar that for a split second his breath halted, as though someone had pressed a hand to his chest. Jovian Hale had come to the cafe expecting the worst blind date of his life. Instead, he found himself staring at the impossible, a woman who looked just like the wife he lost 3 years earlier. A woman who should have been a stranger, but whose presence felt like a haunting, a miracle, and a wound reopening all at once. If you believe in kindness, healing, and second chances, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul of Light to support stories that touch hearts. He wasn't ready for this, not today, not ever. The midday sun streamed through the tall windows, casting golden stripes on the cafe floor and illuminating her features with a softness that made his chest twist. Her name was Seraphine Wade, according to the dating app, and she looked so much like Marin, his late wife. The same gentle jawline, the same quiet poise, the same way her eyes held light as though they stored sunshine. His legs almost buckled as he approached, but somehow he forced himself to sit. He didn't tell her she looked like someone he once loved. He didn't tell her how his hands were shaking under the table, or how the world had narrowed to the shape of her face. Instead, he listened. She talked nervously about her job at a children's rehabilitation center, about how she had signed up for the app on a dare from her cousin, about how she hoped she wasn't wasting his time. Her voice was warm, steady, nothing like Marin's airy laugh. Yet every time she looked at him, he felt like a camera shutter clicking open and shut inside his memory. He tried to keep the conversation polite, but pain curled through him like a storm tide rising. By the time she suggested a walk through the Riverside Park, just a short stretch away, he was sure he should decline. It would be too much, too dangerous, but something compelled him to follow, maybe curiosity, maybe longing, maybe the fragile hope that she wasn't just a reminder of Marin, but someone entirely different, someone who could stand in the present without pulling him backward. The afternoon air was soft, bright, and warm as they strolled beneath the willow trees that brushed the path. Children's laughter rang in the distance. For a while they walked without speaking, the river glittering beside them like scattered coins. Seraphine finally glanced at him with quiet observation, noticing the stiffness in his shoulders, the heaviness he carried. "You seem like someone who's fighting a battle I can't see," she murmured, not accusing, just noticing. He felt his throat tighten. He wanted to say he was fine, but the truth hovered close to the surface. He told her he was a father to an 8-year old boy named Rowan. He told her he worked long hours at the auto shop he co-owned. He told her life was busy, demanding, and complicated. But he didn't mention the way grief still lived in his bones. When he looked up, he found her watching him with an expression that felt like kindness itself. She didn't push for more. She didn't pry. She simply walked beside him, her footsteps matching his as though she understood that some silences needed companionship rather than answers. When they parted, he felt a strange pull in his chest, an ache, a fear, and something almost like relief. He had survived the encounter without falling apart. But when he returned home to the soft chaos of toys on the floor and Rowan's bright smile, the memory of Seraphine stayed with him like a ghost of sunlight. That night, after Rowan fell asleep, Jovian sat at the kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea and stared at the wall. He felt guilty for noticing someone new, guilty for letting a stranger stir emotions he had buried deep, guilty for imagining, even for a moment, what it would be like to sit across from Seraphine again. The guilt felt like betrayal, even though he knew logically it wasn't, but grief didn't obey logic. He considered never contacting her, better to let the date fade like a strange dream. But then a message arrived on his phone, simple and sincere. "Thank you for today. I know something weighed on you. If you ever want to talk or just walk again, I'd be glad." He stared at that message for a long time. Then, against his expectations and fears, he replied. Over the next weeks their meetings became more frequent. Sometimes they grabbed lunch in town during his work breaks. Sometimes they met at the park so Rowan could play while Seraphine talked with him. Rowan liked her instantly. He said she had a soft voice and happy eyes, and Jovian found himself warmed by how naturally she fit into even the smallest corners of their everyday life. He still hadn't told her about the resemblance. He didn't know how, and even though the likeness had startled him at first, the more time he spent with her, the more he noticed the differences that made her wholly unique. Marin had loved painting. Seraphine loved plants and kept tiny succulents growing in recycled teacups. Marin had been shy around children. Seraphine knelt in the grass to show Rowan how to weave clover crowns. Marin had been delicate, almost fragile in spirit, while Seraphine was grounded, steady, quietly strong. She was not a copy of the past. She was something new, and that newness scared him because it meant opening himself to the possibility of healing. The turning point came on a Thursday afternoon when Rowan fell off his bike at the park and scraped his knee. It wasn't serious, but Rowan panicked and cried in sharp hiccups. Jovian rushed to him, fumbling with the first aid kit he always carried, hands clumsy with worry. Before he could manage, Seraphine knelt beside Rowan, calming him with gentle reassurance, cleaning the wound with practiced care. Her focus, her gentleness, her patience, they wrapped around Rowan like a soft blanket. When she looked up at Jovian, her eyes held something warm but unspoken, something that told him she wasn't running from the messy, real parts of life. That evening, as he tucked Rowan into bed, his son looked up at him seriously. "Dad," Rowan said, "I like Miss Seraphine. She makes you smile like you used to." The words pierced him in a way both painful and illuminating. He hadn't realized how tightly the grief had clenched around his life until a child pointed out the cracks where light had begun to seep in, but grief fought back. That night he dreamed of Marin, dreamed of her laughing, turning to him, then fading into mist. He woke with tears on his face and a crushing sense of disloyalty. By morning he was distant, tense, and when Seraphine texted asking if everything was okay, he almost didn't answer. But she deserved the truth, at least part of it. He asked her to meet him by the lakeside, a quiet place where reeds whispered against the shore. The afternoon light shimmered across the water, bright and peaceful, but inside him turmoil churned. When she arrived, he could barely look at her. The confession spilled out about losing Marin, about how Seraphine's appearance had shocked him, about the guilt that haunted him. He braced himself for anger, offense, or hurt. Instead, Seraphine's expression softened into something profoundly compassionate. She sat beside him, letting the silence steady before she spoke. She told him she understood why he hesitated, why he felt torn. She said grief was not a betrayal, and neither was healing. She said she didn't expect anything from him, not now, not ever, except honesty. And she told him gently, with unwavering clarity, that she was not trying to step into a place that belonged to someone else. She simply cared about the person he was today. He felt something inside him break, not painfully, but like ice finally melting after a long winter. They didn't rush into anything. They continued meeting slowly, carefully, letting their bond grow like roots under warm soil. Rowan adored her, and she adored him back, becoming a gentle presence in his world. And over time, Jovian noticed a shift inside himself, not forgetting Marin, never that, but carrying her memory with gratitude instead of suffocating pain. Months later, on a bright afternoon painted with birdsong and warm breezes, Jovian stood in the park watching Seraphine teach Rowan how to fly a kite. The simple scene hit him with overwhelming clarity. This was what healing looked like, not replacing the past, but learning to let new light in. His heart still held scars, but there was room now for something tender, steady, and real. He walked toward them, feeling the weight he once carried easing with each step. And when Seraphine looked at him with that radiant, patient warmth, he realized something profound. Sometimes the universe doesn't give you the person you lost, but the person who helps you find yourself again. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul of Light. Your support helps these emotional stories reach more people who may need them. Special request: comment below what part of the story moved you the most.